Hello YouTube, this is Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you today. Now for this one, as I mentioned in my last videos, I'm going to be continuing with my German series of beer reviews. I'm in Heidelberg in Germany, so a lot of German beer reviews for you to come. But actually in the last day or two I was in my local Galeria Kaufhof, one of the big sort of department stores in Germany if you don't know that already. But they had a little delicatessen rather, and I managed to find 4 Christmas beers there that were obviously sort of have been left over from the Christmas period. So I bought them up and I'm going to review these over my next 4 videos for you. So today I have for you the Mönchshof Weihnachtsbier, and this one comes to you from Kulmbach in the northeastern part of Bavaria, or Bayern as the Germans will call it. You'll actually find a lot of winter seasonals in Germany. They'll either call them Weihnachtsbier, which means Christmas beer of course, Winterbier, just winter beer, and some of them actually call them Winterbox as well, which is just a lot. It tends to be the Bock beer that is the Christmas seasonal in Germany. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll just take you through a little bit of a history of the brewery. This is another one that is actually associated with the religious history of the country, if you like. It's got monasteries and things that are associated with it. But as I always say with my beer reviews, if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free to go on towards the latter part of the video and you will catch that particular segment. As I mentioned, this brewery is from Kulmbach in the northeastern corner of Bavaria, which is famous for being the home of the bratwurst sausage and also of Plassenburg Castle, which actually houses the largest tin soldier museum in the world. And as I mentioned, like many breweries in Germany, the Mönchshof is actually associated with the religious history of Germany, and the brewery itself actually associates itself with both the Cistercian and the Augustiner monks of the village. To tell you about the Cistercian monks first, the Cistercian monks in Kulmbach were well known as hard-working people, and they actually came to wealth through agriculture and livestock and fish farming near the Roden forest. And the Cistercian monastery had so much land that they actually had to create an administrative division for the monastery in the 14th century, and this was known as the Langheimer Amtshof in Kulmbach. Now the Langheimer Amtshof is located in the district of Bleich, and it was in fact the home of the Mönchshof brewery for a period of time, although it's not known exactly when they started brewing here of course. On the other hand, you had the Augustiner monks whose only activity was actually brewing, and their first documented brewing activities date back to the year 1349. Now their monastery was the Margarv, and this was actually located in Kulmbach Old Town, and apparently this is now what is the timber market. But the volume of beer produced by the Augustiner monks was so large that there was actually a drink tax even in the early days of the brewery in the town. Of course, in the town of Kulmbach they had this drinking tax because the brewery was producing so much. But the current brewery site is apparently on the site of the courtyard of this Augustiner monastery, which is referred to as the Mönchshof in old records. But apparently they're not sure exactly when the name Mönchshof came to be used for the brewery, but there are labels in beer mugs dating from around the year 1900 which have this name on it. But to actually move on to the brewery, the history of this brewery itself, moving away from the monasteries if you like, 1528 saw the introduction of Reformation in Kulmbach, and so the monasteries disbanded and their lands and buildings were secularised, and most of them became part of private estates. The first private owners of this estate that encompassed the Mönchshof brewery were actually the Krippler family, who bought it in 1803, but it doesn't say what happened to the brewery during the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries that aren't accounted for. But the estate was actually acquired by Erhard Ender, and he began the production of malt in the Mönchshof, though later in the beginning of the 1860s the Herring family was instrumental in the creation of the brewery. Simon Herring apparently used to brew beer in the Kommune Brauhaus. I'm guessing that's just the sort of community brewery if you like in the town, and then he took his beer to the castle in the rock cellars to mature. So it was quite cool actually. This guy just had to do his beer in the Kommune Brauhaus and then take it up to the castle and actually let it mature in that way. But Simon applied for the brewery licence in 1863, and then he started commercially brewing a year later in 1864, with his early brews apparently being exported over to the United States. But in this early stage the brewery was called Export Beer Brewery Simon Herring, and Simon later passed the brewery on to his son Henry, who turned the privately owned company into a joint stock funded business to fund major expansions to the brewery, with a large part of the shares actually being brought up by merchants from Dresden. But at this point the company was trading as Export Kulmbacher Mönchshof, so this is where you can see where the name started to become a commercial thing. But because of some of the disputes going on with the new corporate company, Simon Herren founded another small brewery called Mittelau, which passed on to the Kulmbach Brauerei in 1897. So he was quite worried that he would lose control of this brewery and then have to start from scratch. So he sort of bought this little one up and made it himself so that he would always have something to go back to in the event that the sort of corporate business became unmanageable, if you like. But the corporation setup actually did prove to be a good move for the brewery, and it grew rapidly for a number of reasons. One was the economic success of the late 19th century in Germany. They also had the use of modern equipment and a strong knowledge of the trade. But at this time the beers went on displays at expeditions in Brussels, Chicago, Antwerp, Nuremberg, Leipzig and in Paris, and they gained significant prizes here, and this actually really raised the profile of beer from the town of Kulmbach, or the Kulmbacher beer as they call it. But by 1892 the company was doing so well that they actually had to build their own private railway that linked with the German rail network, although before this they had actually had fairly easy access to the rail network. The Mönchshof siding is actually still used today for tourist purposes during the summer, with a number of historic trains running on the line, and in 1904 the company actually helped in the creation of the Priory Public Gardens in the Bleich district of Kulmbach, and so they created a beer garden as part of this, which proved very, very popular with the locals at this time, and I think that's actually still in use today. But after this, of course, came the difficult years of the First World War, and in the peace years the brewery was producing a beer called Friedensbrau, which was actually quite high in alcohol content. And in the interwar years and during the Second World War and the late 1940s, the brewery had consistently falling sales, but they began to recover in the early 1950s, and by the early 1960s it was actually the best-selling brewery within the Kulmbach United Breweries, which was just the local association of the small breweries within the town of Kulmbach, of course. But in 1962 the company reverted to being a limited company, going into the hands of the Moisdorfer family. However, in 1984 the brewery merged with Reichelbrau, who were also based in Kulmbach, and this of course meant the closure of the Mönchshof brewery, but the beer was still produced of course in the Reichelbrau brewery. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a tongue twister there. But this was soon reversed in 1991, where the old brewery was reopened, and it also expanded to contain a restaurant and a beer garden. However, in 1997 the Mönchshof brewing was moved to the Kulmbacher Brewery, ending their 112-year association with the Mönchshof Brewery building. But this same brewery building also hosts the Bavarian Beer Museum, which actually opened in 1994, and this apparently now contains a small pilot brewery of 7 hectolitres, which is made completely of glass, so visitors can actually see the brew during the process. And the museum actually expanded in 2002 and won an award for culture in 2003, and they also now host the Bavarian Bakery Museum, which opened in 2008. So as you can see, the history of this brewery is quite a well-known one throughout Germany, and people have recommended that I try the beers from this one. But you can go and see the original building where this brewery was. It's the Bavarian Brewing Museum, obviously somewhere where you would want to go if you're visiting Germany and you're very, very into your beer. But it's quite cool. This is a very well-known beer, of course, in Germany. But just to tell you a little bit about the other beers you can get under the Mönchshof name, you have the Bayerische Hell, which is obviously a sort of Bavarian Helles-style beer, a sort of Munich-style lager, if you like. They have Bock beer, Fest beer, Helles, Keller beer, Kurmquell and Lebuchen beer, which are both Dortmunder style Helles beers. They have Lager, Maibock, Meingold Land beer, which is a sort of Keller Zwickel or a Land beer, it's something called over here. It's quite a common style in the Franconia region, which is just to the north of Bavaria, of course, here, and it's a hoppier version of the Helles style beers. And they also have Original Pils, Schwarzbier and Weinachtsbier, which is obviously this one here. So let's get on with the tasting of this guy here, and as I say, if you're interested, I'll put the brewery website in the description so you can go and check it out, and also check out the Bavarian Brewery Museum if you do happen to find yourself in Kulmbach. But I'll just let you have a little look at the bottle art and stuff on this one, as I always do here. I'll just bring up the camera and make sure you can see it. As you can see here, there's St. Nicholas, as the Germans will call him, rather than Father Christmas. So as you can see, it's just a nice sort of standard thing here. As you can see, if I bring that up there, there's the Mönchshof sort of crest, if you like, there, and it's also on the sort of pop top of this one here. But to tell you a bit about the style of this one is a 5.6% Märzen beer. It's the winter seasonal beer, as I said in the start of this video. But let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting here. I always like to see how big a pop these guys make. Now, that one was a little bit rubbish, I guess, but still, doesn't matter. It's more the beer that we're interested in here. But this one, I would think, usually Christmas beers have a nice little sort of spicy element to them in my experience, if you like. So I'm interested to see what this guy is like, of course. Just make sure this doesn't go too crazy. German beers are known for being big foamy beers. The Germans love a beer with a good head on it here. But as you can see, it's a nice sort of dark golden colour. It's actually crystal clear. I can see my fingers through that. There's some big bubbles, some little ones just going up to the top there. There's just about a 2-finger, maybe a slightly off-white head there, but it's a very, very foamy head. Not much of a big bubbles and stuff in there. Not very bumpy. Definitely a sort of foamy head here. In terms of the aroma here, a lot of pale malts actually. It's very, very grassy smelling actually. A lot of grassy character in here. You can pick up some sort of cereal elements as well, I would say. And there's a little hint of caramel in the background there, but mainly that grassy character pushing through. And there is just a little bit of maybe citric fruit, I would say. Let's just see if we can get the last little bit of this guy in here. There we go, let's just shut this guy up. As I mentioned, the Germans like to keep their beer fresh. I told them they needed to drink a bit more quickly, but you know, they like to keep their beer fresh in Germany, so you always close your top on these beers when you're in Germany. But yeah, definitely, like I say, a lot of grassy character in this one. Perhaps a bit of caramel as well, but there is a sort of underlying cereal aroma here. And as I mentioned, it's meant to be a Märzen style beer. I always thought Märzens were darker, but the Germans have this sort of lighter Märzen style here. But it's a really nice smelling beer, definitely a sort of gardeny. It does smell like the other Märzen beers that I've had when I've been in Germany, that sort of lighter and kind of pale malted beer. A lot of grassy character in here, as I mentioned, and some fruits as well. But let's give this guy a taste and see how we get on. It's actually very malty. It's a lot more malty than the aroma would let you believe. In that, I would say you're getting a lot of grassy character from the smell, but it is a very malty beer on first tasting. Yeah, big bready malts in there with a nice hint of caramel. Slightly bitter on the finish, I would say, but the bready character in this is really nice, I have to admit. I like that style of beer that you get in Germany with the big bready and caramel malts. Yeah, really nice mix of bready and caramel malt. As I say, it blends really, really well together. There's maybe just a little hint of spice within that, which is what you would expect from a Christmas beer. Usually they like to add a little bit of spice onto these things here in Germany. I'm not quite sure what this style of beer does have to do with Christmas actually. Usually the beers that they produce for Christmas are a lot darker than this, but it's a really nice Märzen style beer, if you like, anyway. It's really, really enjoyable. But yeah, like I mentioned, it has that really nice malty backbone to it. A lot of bready malt, nice caramel blended in there, quite sort of strong and maybe darker caramel, if you like. It doesn't quite have a roasted character to it, but it's a bit of a darker caramel in that way. But yeah, it's just slightly bitter on the finish. Maybe just a little slight hint of citrus in there. Maybe even there's a little bit of herbal character to the hops in this one, but this is a really interesting beer. I think there is perhaps just a little bit of spice in the character, but as I mentioned, I would expect a Christmas seasonal beer to be quite a bit darker than this, considering the ones I've had before. The Heidelberger beer that I get here in Heidelberg on tap is more of a red beer, and it's got a really, really nice sort of spice character to it. It just tastes like a Christmas beer. This one is more just like you would expect from a year-round beer rather than being a seasonal. But that said, it is a very, very enjoyable beer. In terms of the mouthfeel, it's very smooth on the palate. I would have expected it to be a little bit more crisp with all the carbonation that's visible in it, but it does have that sort of trademark German smoothness to it, I would say. There is a good bit of carbonation. If you put the carbonation to the front of your tongue, if you just push a little bit of the beer to the front of your tongue, you can hear it, you can sort of feel it going into your tongue, but if you're just sort of taking a gulp of it, it's a lot smoother in that way. So it does have that trademark German smoothness to it, but it's a very easy drinking beer, this one. It's a really enjoyable one. I could see myself using this as a session beer quite a bit, but it's only a seasonal beer, so that's probably a difficult thing to do. But then again, if you do visit one of the brew pubs in Kulmbach, you probably can do that quite easily. But yeah, I have to say, I like this beer. Overall, I'm not sure exactly what it has to do with Christmas, in honesty. But I really like beers that have this sort of bready and caramel malt backbone to it, and it just has a tiny little bit of spice. But as I mentioned, I would expect a Christmas seasonal beer to be a lot darker than this. But there are a number of these Mönchshof breweries, Mönchshof beers rather, available that I can pick up for you, so I will review more of these at a later date. This is one of the more well-known German breweries, of course, what from a famous town in the northeastern part of Bavaria, so you will see me reviewing more of these before I head home to Scotland. I've really enjoyed this one actually, so hopefully I can pick up a few bottles just for session, but these were actually reduced, so I'm looking forward to drinking a few more of these for you. But I hope you found this beer review interesting and informative. Please let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this one if you do happen to have tried it, and please of course suggest German beers for me to review. I always like getting beer suggestions from my subscribers and stuff, and thanks again for your support. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I'll be back tomorrow with another German beer. This next one will be, I think it's from I can't even remember now, but I have another Heidelberger beer for you, which I'll probably do, and the next other reviews will be the other 3 Christmas beers that I've got. But thanks again for watching my YouTube channel, and thanks for all your support. I'll catch you soon with another beer review. Cheers.